CPAC Australia 2023. We're starting things off the right way here at CPAC. You know him as the 28th Prime Minister of Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, for your keynote address, give a warm welcome to Tony Abbott.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. I'm always thrilled to get a welcome like that. It's always wonderful to see the audience get up off their feet at the start of the speech. But you only know that you've done well if the audience rises to its feet at the end of the speech. That's my challenge, to drive you out of your chairs by the end of these remarks. It is great to be in such company. It's great to follow the wonderful Warren Mundine to the podium today, because I want to say to all of you that the referendum currently before our nation is an absolutely critical time in our history. Are we going to be a nation of constitutional equality? Are we going to be a nation that reflects Bob Hawke's immortal words that this is a country with no hierarchy of descent, this is a country with no privilege of origin? Or are we going to be a nation where people are first and second class citizens based on how long some of their ancestors have been here in Australia? And I want to say, thank God for Warren Mundine and Jacinta Price. Two absolutely magnificent Australians who cherish their Aboriginal ancestry and heritage, but are not defined just by that. One, a proud Walpiri Celtic Australian woman, the other a proud Bundjalung Anglo-Celtic Australian man, just as I am myself, I suppose. Not that I make too much of it. An English, Welsh, Dutch Australian who happens to live in what was once Gadigal country, but which is now the great city of Sydney, a place with an Aboriginal heritage, a British foundation and an immigrant character, and is now the leading city of the least racist and most colourblind country on earth, a fragrant fact of which every Australian, regardless of race or creed or gender, should be overwhelmingly proud. Now, ladies and gentlemen, come October the 14th, because I think that's going to be the date, I will be voting no. I will be voting no because I say a resounding yes to constitutional equality, and because I say a resounding yes to Australians moving forward together as one equal people. Now, I've got to say that this referendum proposal that we are being asked to consider is an absolute travesty. It would entrench race in our constitution. It would reinforce the separatism that is at the heart of Indigenous disadvantage, and it would make our already creaky governmental processes even more gummed up. Now, I accept that our history, even the history of Australia, is far from perfect. Yes, if you go back far enough, there were injustices, there were massacres, but there was justice too for those who perpetrated them. With 7 white men hanged for the murder of black people after the Myall Creek massacre as early as 1838. But hundreds of Aboriginal men would not have signed up to fight for king and country in 1914 and 1915 if they had been the subjects of a racist empire, including in Trooper Billy Singh, one of our toughest and most successful ever soldiers. And as the incomparable Warren Mundine reminds us every time he speaks, the way to get ahead in this country, the way for everyone to get ahead in this country, as every migrant community knows only too well, is quite simple. It's to go to school. It's to get a job. It's to have a family. It's to buy a house, if you can. It's to start a business, if you can. It's to make the most of your circumstances, whatever they might be. It's to do what every generation of Australians has been encouraged to do. It's to have a go. And it's never ever to wallow in being a victim. And yes, bad things have happened between black and white Australians, just as bad things have happened in the lives of every single one of us. No one has a magic carpet ride through life, but so many good things have happened as well. And it's the good as well as the bad that we should remember and cherish as we go forward as a nation. But for the best part of 100 years, for the best part of a century now, there's been not just official benevolence, however clunky it has sometimes been in its expression, but there has been an absolute abundance of goodwill from every other Australian to every Indigenous Australian. And the last thing that we should be doing right now is jeopardising all of that in a misguided attempt to rewrite our history as a story of shame, in an impossible bid to undo the past, and in a positively harmful bid to replace an old racial distinction with a new one. This generation of Aboriginal Australians are not victims. This generation of non-Aboriginal Australians are not oppressors, and the last thing that we should be doing right now is entrenching victimhood and institutionalising grievance in our governance arrangements, and that's why there can only be one response to this referendum proposal, and it is an absolutely resounding no. Now, my friends, this is our biggest task. Beating this divisive voice is the most important challenge we face as a nation right now. And between now and October the 14th, or whenever the referendum is held, this has to be our main focus. But there is a bigger problem right now, and that is we have a government that is making our country worse, not better. Now, I don't want to say that the current government lacks goodwill or lacks patriotism. I believe that just about every member of the Australian Parliament is trying to do his or her best by his or her own lights. It's just that the lights are wrong and the best is not good enough in the current case. Now, you are here at this CPAC conference, this Conservative Political Action Conference, because you love our country and you want Australians to be the very best we can be, and you want our country to be collectively its best self. So each of you, each of us, needs a personal program of political action beyond just having our instincts confirmed at a gathering such as this and finding more people who think like us. I want to tell you that my first political mentor was the late, great B.A. Santa Maria. Most of you are far too young to remember the late, great B.A. Santa Maria. But Bob Santa Maria always said to those that he could influence that what they should do was to join the political party of their choice and make that the very best that it could be. For some, that was the Labor Party. For some, particularly back in those days, it was the DLP, the Democratic Labor Party. And ultimately, for many, that turned out to be the Liberal Party and the National Party. And I can remember back in 1998, on the day of Santa's funeral, standing up on the adjournment debate in the Parliament that night to declare ringingly that the DLP was alive and well and living inside the Howard government. Can I say, and forgive me those who don't share my creed, that the Catholicisation of the coalition was one of B.A. Santa Maria's great legacies, and I think that has helped the culture and the fundamental strength of the party to which I belong no end. But to make a difference to the way our government works, you've got to be in a political party, preferably one that has the potential to form a government. You might say, what if the existing parties are a dreadful disappointment? And I would say, I understand. There is not a political party that does not at some stage disappoint. As Ronald Reagan used to frequently say, put not your trust in princes, they will always let you down. So if they're all a disappointment, find the one which is the least disappointing, find the one which is the least bad, join it and do your best to make it better. And maybe none of them will ever be perfect. In fact, almost certainly, none of them will ever be perfect. But the one you join, whichever one that is, will be the better for your presence, or at the very least, it will be less bad for your presence. Now, I have to say, when I was turfed as the leader of the Liberal Party, hundreds, if not thousands of people got in touch with me and they said, please, Tony, start a new political party. And I invariably responded to each one of them, I can understand why you feel that way, but trust me, it is always better and easier to fix an existing party than it is to start a new one. And there were some who said that they were quitting the Liberal Party in disgust, to which I invariably said, if good people go, worse people will prevail. And that's the truth. If not you, who? If not now, when? And if I'm not prepared to do it, how can I ask anyone else to do it? And some people said, what can one person do? I'm just one. And yet, as we know, the power of one, under the right circumstances, can do extraordinary things. Indeed, the world changes person by person. Great things ultimately are done by individuals who have had the courage and the foresight and the strength of character to have a go. Look at what one individual has done time and time again down the ages. Think of Jesus of Nazareth. Think of John Monash, the Australian who has probably had more impact on the world at a key moment than any other. Think of Winston Churchill. Think of John Howard. Think of all of the people who had a go and made a difference to our world and our country, and think how much worse it would have been had they not done that. And then ask yourself, why can't I, in my own way, do something similar? When I was young, I had the great privilege of being educated by the Jesuits. And back in the day, the Jesuits had a phrase, genus humanum vivat paucis. I didn't know what it meant. It's Latin, and it was translated for me, the human race lives by a few. And our challenge, each of us, our challenge is to be amongst the few that make a difference, and not just to be amongst the many who go with the flow. Better to be amongst those who make a difference than to be amongst those who simply do what other people tell them to do. And remember this, particularly at those times when success seems far away. Effort does not guarantee success, but lack of effort does indeed guarantee failure. So, my friends, as you know, I was lucky enough to be leader of the Liberal Party for 6 years. The greatest honour of my life was to be the 28th Prime Minister of this country. But I want to tell you that I am extremely proud of my successor, Peter Dutton. There would have been dozens and dozens of political savants telling Peter Dutton not to oppose this divisive voice. He would have been told by person after person, the opinion polls are against you. Do not oppose this voice. And yet, because he is a man of courage and conviction, that is exactly what he has done. And likewise, there would have been many people telling him that nuclear power is toxic in an Australian political context. There would be many people who had been telling him, do not touch this with a barge pole. And yet, if there is one thing that he has been repeatedly urging us to look at over the last few months, it is the realistic prospect of having nuclear power on land, just as we are about to have nuclear power at sea. And this idea that it's perfectly reasonable, in fact absolutely essential for the long-term safety and security of our country to have nuclear reactors tied up at Garden Island or Coburn Sound or Jarvis Bay or wherever the nuclear submarine base ends up being, but it is somehow wrong and immoral and unsafe to have a nuclear reactor producing power on land just a few hundred metres or a few hundred kilometres away is absolutely irrational and ridiculous. And then, of course, we had the policy that was taken in a form that was too little too late to the last election to take some of our compulsory superannuation savings and devote them to the one thing that most gives young Australians a stake in our society, namely a home of our own. I can tell you this, Peter Dutton will not make that same mistake of coming out with strong and credible policies too little and too late in the build-up to the next election. I think it's essential that our country be put on a better footing than it currently is. I am absolutely confident that my political party will go to the next election as a strong and clear alternative to the government of the day. I do not say that our party is ever perfect. I do not say that each and every individual in it is going to be someone who you completely, utterly and perfectly admire. But I do say that it is the best hope of giving this country the better government that it needs, and I hope all of you can bring yourself to support it when the next time comes to choose the government of this country. Thank you very much. I will see you on a polling booth on October the 14th. And I hope to see you on all the polling booths to come. Thank you.